Hey guys, welcome back into History Monday. Today, unfortunately, we have to cover what the realists believe is the most tragic outcome of the Iraq War, and that is the sectarian violence, the sectarian civil war that is unleashed in Iraq between 2005-2008. So to start this episode, I want to draw your attention back to something I said in the very first Iraq episode, and that is this. In Iraq, you had a deep divide between the Sunni population and the Shia population. And this divide doesn't just disappear when the Americans invade Iraq. In fact, it gets very, very much pronounced because if you're going to introduce a democracy, obviously that means that the majority population has an advantage over the minority. And in Iraq, the majority population is the Shia population, the minority is the Sunni population. However, under the Saddam Hussein regime, the Sunnis actually had elevated power because Saddam himself came from the Sunni tribal areas. And so now the Sunnis are worried that this power orientation is going to flip and that the Shia are going to become more powerful. And that worries the Sunni tribal leaders who, as you can imagine, are feeling worried about where their place in Iraqi society is going to be, being a minority. And so, enter the U.S. forces, enter the anarchy that takes place, particularly in places like Baghdad, Basra, Mosul, and you've got this sort of power vacuum that opens up because, again, the United States didn't bring enough forces in to sort of cover and provide security and stability over all of Iraq. Given this situation, a terrorist called Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who is a Jordanian, went to Afghanistan to try to join al-Qaeda, but went a little bit too late, was in Afghanistan for a little bit. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan, so he made his way through Iran and rested in Iraq. And then, out of nowhere, the surprise from heaven, the gift from heaven, the U.S. invades Iraq and they create this power vacuum, this insecurity, this instability. Al-Zarqawi looks at this situation and he's a Sunni and he says, I am going to exploit this power vacuum. I am going to exploit the worry, the fear that the Sunni tribal leaders feel against a Shia-dominated Iraq. So I, Zarqawi, am going to institute a civil war between the Shia and the Sunni. And so what Zarqawi starts doing is he starts bombing Shia-dominated areas and killing a lot of Shia. And what it does is it sparks Shia reprisals, Shia revenge. And so the Shias start to attack the Sunnis. And Zarqawi's hope is that the Sunni leaders and the Sunni people will turn to the insurgency, the Sunni-led insurgency, to protect them, to protect their lands, and that through the Sunni leaders turning to the insurgency to establish an Islamic State in Iraq will sort of proliferate. And you'll even get foreign fighters coming across the border to join this Sunni-led insurgency. And that's exactly what happens. It's actually, tragically, it's a brilliant strategic move by Zarqawi because he sees the power vacuum. He starts attacking Shia, the Shias start attacking the Sunnis, and the Sunnis turn towards the jihadist organizations to provide security, safety, and to fight back against the Shia. And so this continues to escalate, these attacks from the Sunni against the Shia against the Sunni, and all the while the insurgency, the jihadist-led insurgency is growing and proliferating, which means not only are the Sunni attacking the Shia, but they're also growing in sophistication and deadliness of their attacks against the U.S. and the occupying forces. And so you start to see, if you look at, I'll try to provide one right here, but if you look at the casualty figures of American soldiers, it spikes in between 2005 and 2007. The last thing I want to note here is that this Iraqi insurgency led by Zarqawi, who's killed in 2006 but continues under different leadership, is actually the precursor, the pre-runner to ISIS. Zarqawi even calls his organization the Islamic State in Iraq, ISI. And the people and the leaders who are affiliated with Zarqawi and who sort of fill the leadership void after he gets killed are the people who eventually lead to the creation of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL or ISIS, depending on whose nomenclature you want to use. And so it's really important that we, as informed citizens, understand how this insurgency started. It started because Zarqawi knew that he could provoke sectarian tensions because the U.S. had not provided enough security and stabilizing force in the region. And so Zarqawi comes in, he starts a sectarian civil war, and who grows in civil wars? Who grows in areas where there's power vacuums? It's going to be jihadist organizations who are very powerful, very strong, very ideologically driven. And that's what we've seen in Iraq, we've seen it in Yemen, we've seen it in Libya, we've seen it in Syria, we've seen it in Afghanistan. If there's a power vacuum, if there's instability, and there's sectarian tensions, you can bet that you will see a Sunni Islamic jihadist organization take root and start to fight back and promote attacks against the Shia and promote attacks against the West. So there you go, guys. That was the strategy behind the sectarian civil war and the spike in violence we saw in Iraq between 2005 and 2007. Next week, we'll talk about the American response under General David Petraeus, the man who institutes the surge. But until then, remember, reality always, guys, it always trumps ideology.